Hi, and welcome back to Beyond the Pew. My name's Taylor Schroll, and today we're continuing our series that we began last week on misconceptions about Jesus. Last week, Jennifer talked to us about the misconception that Jesus was nice to everyone and was all about just peace, kind of the 1970s Jesus, if you will. Today, we're going to be continuing with this series, and I'll be talking about the misconception that Jesus is weak. So when you think of a strong person, what do you think of? I know the first thing you think of might be like they're physically strong. Once we kind of got past that, we'd go towards they're a strong-willed person, they're someone who's a strong leader or of strong character. So I want to kind of walk through these things that kind of define what strength really is and walk through that in the life of Jesus. So let's talk about the first one first, just get it out of the way, about physically strong, right? So we don't often think about Jesus being this big, strong guy. A lot of our paintings and things that we see make Jesus look fairly girly. I saw one that makes him look almost exactly like Tom Brady. We just don't really view him as a strong man. But if you think about it, he didn't have fast food. He wasn't eating as poorly as we do. And he also walked everywhere. I wear this little Fitbit to show how much I have walked, or most days how much I haven't walked in that day. But Jesus didn't just walk down the road when he wanted to go to the gas station. He didn't just walk down the road when he wanted to go get some food like we get in our car to do. He walked across an entire country to go share his message and his mission. So he had to be a guy that was in shape. Okay, but that doesn't really matter all too much about what we're talking about today. I want to focus in on his character, his strength of will, and also his strength of his leadership. So first, in his leadership, Jesus was a man who commanded respect and that got people to follow him. If I told you that there was somebody today who could just walk up to you at your job and say, hey, this is who I am, this is my mission, and I want you to join, how many of us would just get up and follow that person? Not many, right? This is what Jesus did over and over again. He walked up to fishermen. He walked up to tax collectors. He walked up to lawyers while they were at work and said, hey, I'm Jesus. This is what I'm about. Come follow me. And they were like, okay. Like, that is a strong, strong leader. And then also he was able to stay strong in his leadership even when he got opposition. When the Pharisees and Sadducees tried to trip him up with questions, he would either rebuke them and call them a brood of vipers, or in other times he would turn the question back to them, or he would write in the sand as they walked away. He didn't allow other people's opposition to deter him from his leadership in leading himself and others to the mission that he was trying to accomplish. Finally, in his character and his will, when you think about somebody who has a strong character, a strong will, it's someone that you want to be around. It's someone who is strong no matter the circumstances. The first story that I think about when I hear this is Jesus is being tempted when he's fasting. So he's been out in the desert for 40 days and for 40 nights. He's physically weak at this point. You know, I go a few hours without food, and I'm like, oh, woe is me. This has been 40 days, and he is at his weakest physically, and this is when Satan comes to tempt him. Say, bow down to me and I'll give you this. Bow down to me and I'll give you this. And it's at that moment that Jesus shows his real strength and his character and his will to say no and rebuke Satan with the word of God from the scriptures, and to be able to say, no, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I know what I'm about, and you're not going to be able to tempt me away from that. And I think a lot of times you and I know that we are weak at times, whether it's physically or emotionally or spiritually. We know that whenever we're tempted, sometimes it's hard to not fall into those temptations. So what does this mean for us? How do we continue to grow in our strength? And I think it's relying on the strength that Christ not only shows us, but he provides for us. So whenever we are struggling with temptation, we're struggling with our weakness, we need to bring that weakness to him, and he can give us his strength so that we can accomplish everything that he would like us to. And then the last story from Jesus' life that I want to show, I think it's where he showed the most strength, is actually whenever he dies on the cross. So I think about those of us in our country who are in the military. You know, they risk their lives to go protect their loved ones, to protect their country. And in so protecting our country, they know that they're protecting people who they may not agree with, who they might not be friends with, or who they may even be enemies with. But they still go and they serve and they risk their lives for our country's freedom. Jesus did something very similar. He died not just for his mom and his brothers and his friends and those who would walk around with him, but he died for his enemies. He died literally for the people who were murdering him. And this is the true sign of strength, to be able to lay down your life for not only your friends, but also for your enemies. So I think we can all agree that this Jesus is weak stuff just doesn't work. Jesus was a strong, strong man. So how do we in our lives work with this information? Because you and I both know that we're created with weakness. Jesus was perfectly human and perfectly God, but we are created with weakness. And every time I'm faced with this, I come back to this picture that I saw, and I just want to read it to you. It says that it goes through all these Old Testament and New Testament figures and shows how they were weak and how God used them in that way. So that Jacob was a cheater, Peter had a temper, David had an affair, Noah got drunk, Jonah ran from God, Paul was a murderer, Gideon was insecure, Miriam was a gossip, Martha was a worrier, Thomas was a doubter, Sarah was impatient, Elijah was moody, Moses stuttered, Zacchaeus was short, Abraham was old, and Lazarus was dead. These are all people who had very real weaknesses, but it's in those weaknesses that God shows his power to the world. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, it says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It's in our weakness where we have to cry out to God and say, God, I can't do this alone. I need your help. And it's in those moments where he shows us his strength by meeting us where we are and helping us along in those situations. So as you go through this week, I just want to ask you, where do you get your strength from? Where are the places where you're weak and you need help? And I just encourage you to bring those things to God in prayer this week and know that he is with you and know that he wants to give you this strength so that you can follow him in the great mission that he has called you to. Thanks and have a good week.